Hey everybody, welcome back to the Survivor week number 4. We're picking winners with the cheese. Woo! Sunday, bloody Sunday. Oh man, that was a tough week. Let's get into it right away. How did you do? We were remember last week we talked about we had all those big 6-point and higher favorites, 7 of them, and we suggested 1 or 2 would probably lose. You had to guess which ones. I guessed poorly because not only were there 2, there were 3, and I picked all 3. So here you can see my big pool. My 6 plays and 3 are gone. A lot of people are gone. Our top 5 plays didn't do so well either. They went 2 and 3. At least the bonus plays went 3 and 2. Not quite as bad. You can see Kansas City over. Now, I also had the Chicago team total over. Thank you, Bears. I didn't think that game could hit 48 with the Bears scoring 10 freaking points. Jacksonville total over. I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. Remember last year at the end of the year, they won like 5 or 6 in a row in the regular season to get into the playoffs. And then they go and come back and beat the Chargers in a playoff game. So they're gearing up, and it looks like they're ready to make a move this year. They've been terrible. Baltimore gets smacked by Indy. That was awful. Now, Cleveland, I love that game. Gave you that one. I had logic behind it, and they crushed Tennessee pretty easily. We also took Deshaun Watson over passing yards because Tennessee can't seem to stop the pass. They stopped the run. And that one hit in the bonus plays for you. Over on the bonus side, Philadelphia first quarter. We're just going to keep playing it until it loses. It just keeps winning every single week. And you could have played Philadelphia first half as well. I didn't this time, and I should have because that won too. The Jags, we lost. Atlanta team total over. Wow, Detroit's defense is better than they were last year. I'm still not sold on them, but I'm more sold that Atlanta's offense really isn't all that great. It's just a one-dimensional running kind of offense. And then Seattle team total over wins again, and that seems to be a playable item here. So yeah, my picks of the primary poll, look at this. 3 losers, and I mean, the Jacksonville game, I don't know. The Jacksonville special teams coach maybe should be fired. So they kick a field goal, miss to start the game. Then they get a second field goal. It's blocked. Later, they scored a field goal to make it 17-10. So they pull within a touchdown, and then look what happens. They let a fullback, mind you, take a look here. He fails to catch the ball, but then he goes to pick it up. And now if you'll notice, look at him running. That is a fullback running. He has a towel. A guy who has a towel around their waist should not be returning kicks for a touchdown. But he did, and Houston went back up 24-10, and the game was over from there. I'm like, how does that happen? Then look at the Baltimore game. I want you to take a look here now. It gets into overtime. I hate blaming referees for stuff, right? And I'd rather see a call not be called towards the end of the game than be called. But take a look here. Zay Flowers, and he's running towards the top of our screen there. You see his right arm. Look here where his right arm is going straight, and he's running forward. And then you see here, his right arm is clearly, his body's getting twisted in a direction, and the ball is clearly not there yet. I don't think anyone on the planet, even the Colts, couldn't understand how pass interference was not called on this play. But it wasn't. That was 4th down. Indy only had to go about 20 yards, kick a field goal, game winner. It's over, and it knocked out a zillion of us in Survivor, as you can see here. We had effectively 1,791 entries in my big pool. 553 remain only as 504 were eliminated. Almost 30% were eliminated last week. You can see those top loss choices. Jacksonville and Baltimore, that's 335 of us. And then Dallas. Unbelievable, man. How do you do that? How do you pretend you're the best team in the NFL? You watch the Giants take them for granted, and then you go in there and play like that? Dallas is not a Super Bowl contender. You see the win choices. 20 different teams were selected on Sunday, Bloody Sunday. Key Survivor metrics, straight up. You can see home teams at least had a winning record and are trying to get back to 50% this year, 500. Favorites had a decent week. They're still well below their standard mark. Home favorites still well below, although they had a nice week. Away favorites are still our best play, 12-5. They're winning 70% of games right now, beating their standard metric of 63. Thursday night favorites get back on track with San Francisco, up to 2-1. But our top 5 Survivor pool choices, 2-3 this week, dropping us to 9-6 overall. That is terrible. Against the spread, you can see here every metric is down except away favorites are kicking it. They're 9-6 against the spread, 60% to the good. You're gonna have to start playing those away favorites. The OU, oh my gosh, have we seen a ping pong tennis ball kind of wacky thing with the OU? Week 1, the over goes 4-12. Week 2, the over goes 13-3. Week 3, it goes 5-11. This is nuts. Anyway, it's back down under 500 at 22-26. 6-point favorites. Remember, they were 6-0 coming into last week, and that's why we thought there might be a loss or two with all those heavy favorites, because we average 1.25 upsets per week of 6-point favorites and higher. Well, last week we had 3, and you can see they're now 10-3 on the year, which is right basically where they're supposed to be. So we should have predicted 3 losses last week. Normally in a season we have 22 of these. We currently have 3, so we have 19 more to go. If you kind of think about it, we have 19 more to go. How do we avoid those 19? Here's our home away favorites straight up. Home favorites from 0-3 and 3.5 to 5.5 are struggling versus away favorites who are actually doing pretty well in those areas. Now, against the spread, it's the same thing here, and you can clearly see the away favorites are performing much better, even against the spread, than the home favorites are. In fact, home favorites against the spread, 6-14. That's not good. Not good. 6-14. Home favorites between 0 and 5.5. May as well take the dog. All right, here's our schedule for week 4. We've got 4 games with 6-point favorites or higher. You can see there the Eagles. The big one on the board is San Francisco giving 14 to Arizona. Kansas City 9.5 to Jets. Dallas 7 to New England. We have a London game. Atlanta at the Jags. In terms of London games, just so you're aware, favorites are 19-10 straight up. However, they've lost 3 of 4. Jacksonville is 4-5 in London. There's no real trends there, you know, other than Jacksonville is kind of mediocre in London. 2-0 teams, how'd they do last week? 2-0 teams at home typically win 63% of the time. Last week, 2-3, all because Baltimore couldn't win a game they easily should have won. And they won that, they'd been 3-2 and just fit the metric pretty well. 2-0 away teams win less than 50% of the time. Typically, they went 2-2, which is kind of standard. Now, the 0-2 teams, though, they kind of shock you because they're 0-2, yet in the past, they're basically 25-25, 50% winners. Last year, they went 3-0, and this year, look at that. They should have gone 3-0. They go 2-1. Arizona, the one we thought never had a prayer, does get the win. And then Minnesota, how many plays did they run inside the Chargers' 20-yard line the last 5 minutes of the game? About 100, and they couldn't score. Standard Kirk Cousins, I guess. They can't score when they need it. 0-2 teams away, you'll see typically win 40% of the time. They went 3-3, so they did pretty well. 0-2 teams against the spread normally win about 60%. Last year they went 5-2. This year only 5-4. Here's our 3-0 teams and how they fare. 3-0 teams at home win 67% of the time. You can see this week we've got San Francisco, huge favorite, and Philly, a big favorite. One thing to note here, though, okay? Arizona has beaten San Francisco 6 of the last 8 times in San Francisco. I don't know, just a warning there. And Philly, you know, normally they beat Washington. However, last year, Washington went into Philly and clocked them. I think it was 32-21, something like that. They handled them pretty well. Philly was on a big winning streak there. So, you know, you just never know. 3-0 teams away win about 50% of the time. This week we've got Miami 3-0. That offense is phenomenal. But now they go to Buffalo, and they are an underdog. Buffalo has beaten Miami in Buffalo. I think it's 7 straight times. 0-3 teams. Now, I've never seen this, maybe in NFL history. We have 4 0-3 teams, and they all play each other. So they ruin any of our trends here. 0-3 teams at home win almost half the time. And 0-3 teams away only win about 32% of the time. So you would think that Chicago and Carolina would have an advantage here. They're both dogs by 3.5 points. And what do we know so far this year? Away favorites of 3.5 points have been really good. So, I don't know. Anyways, 0-3 teams against spread typically win 60% of the time. This year, they're going to go 2-2. Currently, the overs are 22 and 26. They're hitting 46% of the time. If you take a look at this chart here, On the left there, you can see week 1 through week 6. In the last 5 years, that next column is your OU average per game during that week. And you can see in the last 5 years, most of the time, it steadily climbs. And you can see by week 6 up to 47.15. It's a steady climb. That's the Vegas line that gets set on each game's over-under, the total. And then the next column there, the black numbers, it's the total points per game that we actually score. And you can see there, for the last 5 years, pretty steady, 46, 46, 46. And then week 4 booms up to 49. That's our highest scoring week. And then week 5 it gives you another one of our 3 highest scoring weeks of the year. You can see week 6 pretty good. Then our OU percentage. So early in the season, we have a little more unders going on. Then you can see there weeks 3, 4, and 5 kind of uptick to the overs. Now, last year, weeks 1 and 2, we only scored 42, then 43 points a game. Week 3, 40 points a game. And then week 4, all of a sudden, we boomed up to 49 a game. Last year, we had a kind of a low-scoring year, and that's why unders dominated for most of the year. I think unders ended up being, 56 or 57%. This year, you can see we got off to that slow start in week 1, but week 2 defied the odds. We had 49.75 points per game, so it just blew it out. And then week 3 just tracked back towards normal. Will week 4 be like our previous several week 4s, and we have high-scoring week? Or is it going to be one of these weird things that's going on this year? I don't know. I'm just giving you the information so you have it and you can be aware. But typically week 4 is our highest scoring week of the year, and week 5 is right behind it, okay? Real quick to add on that, and then last year, week 4 at 787 was our highest scoring week, which is coming up this week. Now, in the last 5 years, here's something to note. When the over-under percentage is less than 40%, 31% of the games went over last week. So when our OU percentage is less than 40, in the next week, we see an increase in over percentage 23 out of 29 weeks, okay? 23 out of 29 times that's happened. So 80% of the weeks, we at least should see a higher OU percentage average. We see more overs than we did last week, okay? Now here's maybe a bigger one. So same thing, when the OU is 40% or less, we see a double-digit percent increase 62% of the time. Okay, so last week we were at 31, whatever is it, just call it 31%. So 62% of the time this following week, this week, we should see overs climb up to at least 41% of the time. A lot of times those double digits can mean 20, 30%, okay? So I'm not telling you what to do. However, week 4 has been our highest scoring week typically. And 62% of the time when we have that 30% type of week in overs, we should see it a double digit increase up in the 40% at least, okay? Just an FYI, I'm just presenting the facts, not trying to tell you what to do. Let's get into who our worst 5 teams are right now. This is according to Vegas Super Bowl odds right now, okay? And you can see here, number 1 is still Arizona, 2 Houston, 3 Chicago, 4 Carolina, 5 Denver. Indy drops out, Denver moves in. Chicago plays Denver this week. Okay, our top 5 offenses and defenses. Here's something to take a look at. This is crazy. Miami's averaging 550 yards a game. I mean, of course, after you score 70 freaking points and throw up 8 billion yards against Denver, your average is going to go up. And look at the top there. I put in there, guys. I went back and checked this out. The best ever offensive year in yards per game was St. Louis Rams. Remember that? Greatest show on turf. Kurt Warner, Isaac Bruce, and those guys. Marshall Faulk, Torrey Holt. Year 2000, they put up 442 yards a game on offense. And Miami right now is crushing that. Now, not saying that's going to continue. We're early in the year, but Miami is crushing it. Over 100 yards a game. And look at the defensive leader, Cleveland at 164. That's nuts too, because our best defensive year ever, Minnesota in 1969 at 194 yards a game. Buffalo is second over there. You can see on the offensive side, you've got Miami, Chargers, Minnesota, San Francisco, Kansas City, fairly standard group that we expect. Number 1 passing, number 1 rushing is both Miami. Now that's kind of shocking. On the defensive side, Cleveland leads with Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, New England. Cleveland's number 1 pass defense. Number 1 rush defense is Philly. Cleveland is right behind them, though, at number 2. This week, we get number 1 offense, Miami, going against the number 2 defense, Buffalo. Now, I can tell you this. Typically, when we have games where it's the number 1 offense against the number 1 defense, most of the time, the number one defensive team wins. Buffalo is at home. They're a favorite. It's going to be a great game. Can't wait to see how it goes. I'm definitely not counting Miami out of it. Let's get into the dog report. This is a scary week for Survivor. Last week on paper, it looked too good to be true with all those favorites. There were a lot of options, and of course, it failed on us. It failed miserably. It threw a lot of us out of the pool. This week, it looks scary as heck. Now watch all the favorites come in. I don't know, but let's take a look at our dogs this week. I have a lot that I think could potentially win. Starting off, boom, home dogs. Thursday night, Green Bay is at home against Detroit. Thursday night favorites have done very well in the last 2 years. They're off to a 2-1 start this year. Detroit's currently the favorite. Green Bay's at home. I'm not sold on Detroit. I know Detroit's defense has played pretty well so far, but Jordan Love's looked okay. I think Green Bay could win this game. I'm not going to count them out for sure. I think this game's totally at risk for Survivor. I wouldn't play it. Chicago, Denver. The way they've looked, you would think Denver would beat them, but at some point, Chicago's going to get going. When Justin Fields started becoming the number one rusher for the Bears last year, they started averaging something like 22, 23 points a game. In fact, last time they won a game, they beat New England like 35-14 or something like that. They crushed them. So at some point, if Fields starts running the football, you would think they get it going and at least score some points. They are the number one over team this year, but not because they're scoring. My favorite one, though, is probably Houston game. They've killed me, okay? 2 weeks ago, I picked them, and they stunk it up and lost for me against Indianapolis. Then last week, I picked Jacksonville, and they turned around and whooped me. So whatever I say about Houston this week, just ignore it and go the opposite direction. But I think they could pull off an upset here. C.J. Stroud looks great. Pittsburgh's defense has given up a ton of yards. I would pick Pittsburgh. I'm just saying, I think Houston's playing well. Stroud's playing terrifically. Looking at the road dogs, you look at Atlanta, Jacksonville, and I would think Jacksonville would bounce back and win. That's what I said last week. Now you're going against a running team. Jacksonville can't really stop anybody, and their offense has not kicked it in gear this year. They're not what they were at the end of last year for some reason. I don't know what's going on there, but it's not going well. Miami, Buffalo, no way am I counting out a team that averages 500 yards a game on offense. I don't care who they're playing. Now, Buffalo has a pretty good defense. They are at home. They'll be geared up for this one. And I'm not sure Miami's defense is all that great. I think this turns out being a shootout. Now, I try to come up with some trends to support how teams perform after a 70-point week. But I just couldn't find much on that. How do you score 70 points, man? Denver should just be ashamed of themselves. Oof. New England and Dallas, are you kidding me? How can I count New England out? First of all, their defense is pretty strong. And we saw Dallas now. They beat up the Giants with Danny Dimes, who's an okay quarterback. He's not a top 12 or 15 quarterback. And then they beat up Zach Wilson, who's clearly not a top 20 quarterback. I don't know where he's at. Most of you are going, he's 32nd as a starting quarterback. But, then they go down to Arizona and just look like bung. They stunk. Josh Dobbs eats them alive. Dallas should romp. They should bounce back and romp, but they should have crushed Arizona too. So I'm not counting them out yet. Baltimore, Cleveland. Now, you guys know me by now. I like Cleveland. I think they're undervalued. Their defense is now first in the league. Baltimore has a good defense. These teams played to like a 13-3 game last year in Cleveland. It was low scoring, and I think it's going to be low scoring again. Both teams would rather run the ball. Both teams have pretty good rush defenses. I think this one could go either way. I'm not sure. I kind of like Cleveland. If Baltimore had won last week and come in here 3-0, I would pick Cleveland. But they come in off a loss. Good teams off a loss tend not to play as poorly as they did the week before. Seattle and the Giants. Seattle's offense is good. And I don't see the Giants stopping them. The Giants have given up 30 to everybody they've played, basically. I don't see why Seattle can't do the same thing. Seattle has really good receivers. And then you look at the final one there, the Rams and Indy. The Rams have been great so far. I know they're 1-2, aren't they? Are they 2-1 or 1-2? They're 1-2. They lost to San Francisco, as good as it gets. And then last week, they get beat by Cincinnati, who was in a position where they had to win. Burrow at home. Cincinnati at home is a good play most of the time. Now they're playing an Indianapolis team who's definitely outperformed what everybody's expectations were at the beginning of the season. But The Indy secondary has not been phenomenal. They haven't exactly shut teams down. Stafford's got it rolling with Atwell, Jefferson, Pukanuka, and then Higbee. Kyron Williams is running the ball okay. The LA offense looks pretty solid. I think this game turns into a higher scoring game, honestly. Let's get into who's in play this week, all right? Week 4 in play playoff team options. There's very few. I can only come up with 4. And I'm not sure the Chargers are a playoff team. But as we look at it, my number 1 is San Francisco. I mean, clearly 14-point favorites at home. Brock Purdy has not lost a regular season game that he's started. And I don't think it's going to happen now, although I don't want to jinx it like I did last week. San Francisco is different than Dallas, though. They don't typically choke games. Shanahan gets his team ready to go. They're great on offense, great on defense. The only thing I would say here is Arizona's beaten San Francisco 6 out of 8 in Frisco. That scares you a little bit, but a lot of those games were with Kyler Murray, not Josh Dobbs. Okay. Number 2, Philadelphia. They looked great last week, didn't they? They looked great. I thought Tampa would give them a much tougher game, and I don't think it was ever in doubt. I never felt like it was in doubt. Jalen Hurts was strong. Now, Washington did go into Philly last year and beat them, and I think Washington ended their unbeaten streak at that point. Washington beat them pretty good, like 32-21, so be careful there. But I don't see Philly having a problem here. Their defenses look fantastic. They're getting a great push on the quarterbacks. And Howell, of course, last week threw the 4 picks, got sacked a bunch of times. You would think Philadelphia would have that similar kind of success here. Kansas City at the Jets, I mean, it's going to be almost impossible for Zach Wilson to keep up with Pat Mahomes, right? I don't care how good that Jet defense is. Now, we've seen Mahomes early in seasons have bad games where he's had multiple turnover games, right? An interception, a fumble, these kinds of things. And if the Jets defense can score some points, maybe, but I'm not counting on it. I think in general, you're looking at a Jets team that can't score a lot of points, and Kansas City's defense is playing as well as we've ever seen it, honestly. And their offense is bound to score some points, so Kansas City looks like a solid play. Vegas at the Chargers. Now, the reason I like the Chargers here is because in this series, typically, Vegas wins in Vegas, Chargers win in Charger land. I don't want to say LA because both of them have been in LA. I like the Chargers to come back home and get things moving. Their offense has been fantastic, right? And Vegas can't really stop anybody. I think the Chargers take care of it here this week. Now, teams that are non-playoff team options that I think are in play, I got 2 of them. One is your 0-3 Minnesota Vikings. At some point, this team gets that offense clicking and wins a game, and I don't think Carolina's defense is the one to stop it. They're a top 5 offense. Jefferson's the number 1 receiver in the league. Addison's solid. Hawkinson has been unreal. So at some point, Minnesota is actually going to lamb-blast the team and win by a touchdown. I think it's this week. Pittsburgh at Houston. Again, I talk about how I like Houston, I like CJ Stroud, but they've screwed me each of the last 2 weeks. I think you're going to have a combination of Harris and Warren running all day, and Pittsburgh should win this football game. Now, the maybes, I put Jacksonville there. I don't know. I said last week Atlanta has a great offensive line, and they can run the ball. Maybe they, put Detroit on its heels. Maybe they do that to Jacksonville. Jacksonville's defense hasn't stopped anybody this year, and their offense just hasn't gotten it going. But I would expect Jacksonville to finally get something working. I mean, you couldn't play worse last week, especially on special teams. New Orleans, home against Tampa Bay. New Orleans has had Tampa's number the last few years, and their defense is top 10 defense the last 8 years, and so far they've been unbelievable, except for the fourth quarter last week, right, when Jordan Love came back against them. But now you're talking Baker Mayfield. Marshawn Lattimore has been phenomenal against Mike Evans. He tends to keep him, down. Mike Evans doesn't have these 100-yard, 2-touchdown games against New Orleans. So it really leaves you Baker and Godwin kind of thing. I think New Orleans beats them. Alvin Kamara is back, by the way, so their offense should look a little bit better. Baltimore and Cleveland, I'm a Cleveland guy right now, so I'm a little bit biased here. I think they're a good team. That one's going to be interesting. Cincinnati at Tennessee, you would look at that paper, you're going Cincinnati will kill them. But Joe Burrow clearly was limited last week. He couldn't throw every pass, especially deep. On the other hand, you don't have to necessarily beat Tennessee deep. You can beat them every which way in the passing game. You just can't run against them. Tennessee, though, on the other hand, at home, obviously is a great running team. Derrick Henry hasn't really lit it up yet this year. And Cincinnati's rush defense is not good. It's one of the bottom 5 in the league. So Tennessee could have some success on the ground if they get a lead. Could be a grinder game where they win time of possession. Don't let Joe Burrow have a chance. Rams at Indy. I like the Rams. I think the Rams are playing at the beginning of the year. When I was checking out everybody's lists, and especially the ones I liked the most, the Rams' offensive line was predicted to be bottom 5. Their defense was projected to be bottom 5. So far, their defense, I would say, is mid-pack. It's definitely not bottom 5. And their offensive line has been pretty solid for the most part. I think the Rams will beat Indy, despite Indy's success so far. New England at Dallas. Obviously you have to go at Dallas. Not obviously. Not in my world. I hate the Cowboys. I think New England's going to have a better game than they thought. The Cowboys should win, though. Risky games, I wouldn't touch these. You can see there, Detroit, Green Bay, Denver, Chicago, Seattle, Giants, Miami, Buffalo. I think any of those games could go any direction. Here's my picks in the primary pool. At this point, you could see what I'm doing there. I think I'm going to go Minnesota. I want a non-playoff team. Now, you guys have followed me. No, I can be a little risky in my picks. But it tends to pan out. For some reason, people get scared of those kind of picks. Like Minnesota on the road, an 0-3 team, giving 3.5. I look at stupid stuff like away favorites of 3.5 points have been rock solid so far this year. Minnesota's offense is rock solid. There's no one on Carolina that can cover Justin Jefferson. And if they do, you still have Hawkinson, Addison, and everybody else. I can't see how Carolina could keep up with them in terms of scoring points. Seattle, last week, 37-27. I could see that kind of game again here with Minnesota. I think I'm going to take them. I'm not going to be afraid. You can't be afraid in Survivor. Of course, I could get knocked out. And then you can see I'm looking right now at Philly and San Francisco, although I kind of want to go for maybe one of those other non-playoff teams. I think the Chargers might be a non-playoff team this year. I don't know. But Pittsburgh or the Chargers, I would probably lean Pittsburgh. The Chargers always screw me. I don't want to have Minnesota and the Chargers in the same week. So if I did, I'd probably go Pittsburgh. But at this point in my mind, I'm going Minnesota, Philly, San Francisco. Now, real quick, teams' records against the spread here before we get into my picks. You can see Miami, Zona, 3-0. Green Bay, 3-0. Philly and the Rams, pretty good. Denver and Chicago, 0-3. They play each other. Carolina, Minnesota, 0-2-1. They play each other. So someone's getting a win somewhere on that bottom side against the OU. Chicago's 3-0 to the over, and they can't score. So it just tells you how bad their defense is. You can see the other teams. And Denver's 2-1 to the over. You get a little scared Chicago can't score at all, but I'm still going to play that over. On the other side, Baltimore is 3-0 to the under, and they go against a Cleveland defense that's been phenomenal. I kind of like the under there, right? So here's what we're looking at week 4. You see we're 9-6 year to date. First of all, I want to say, on the player props, I haven't seen them yet. This is what I hate. I don't get these lines yet because I do the video early in the week. But if I had to go with some just off the top of my head right now, I'm going to take Joe Burrow over passing yards against Tennessee. I'm going to keep playing that because Tennessee stuffs the run, but they give up a lot of passing yards. And even though Burrow is limited to an extent, you still have Jamar Chase and these guys. T. Higgins had a horrible game last week. I think he'll bounce back into a much better game. So I think ultimately he should be able to get it over. Now, I just need to see what that total is before I decide, right? But in my head, I'm kind of thinking that's a way you can go. Philadelphia first quarter, I'm taking it until it loses. At this point, it just keeps winning. Seattle total over 23.5 against the Giants. The Giants haven't stopped anybody. Now, I know they've played Dallas and Kansas City, 2 really good teams. But they've given over 30 to everyone. Even Arizona got, 28? I see Seattle having no problem getting to 24 here. I'm taking that. I'm taking the Denver-Chicago over as you saw those numbers. Chicago 3-0, Denver 2-1. I'm just going to ride it. Even though I don't think either team is that good on offense, I think either team is not that good on defense. Cleveland-Baltimore, I take the under. We just talked about Cleveland number 1 defense. Baltimore 3-0 to the under. Rams-Indy over. I'm going the over there. I don't think they'll be able to stop the Rams, and I don't necessarily think the Rams will be able to stop Indy. If there is a weakness on LA, it's their secondary. Michael Pittman has been, go look at his numbers. He's been unreal. Bonus plays, Philly first. Now, that's why I put 6 plays in the top 5. Because if the Burrow number comes out and it's ridiculous, then I would throw that down to the bonus or maybe out, okay? That's my thinking there. And the bonus plays, Philly first half. Last week it hit again, so I'm just going to ride that one until it doesn't hit. Kenneth Walker over in rushing yards. The Giants' rush defense is one of the 5 worst in the league. Kenneth Walker has been great so far this year. He had 97 yards last week against Carolina, and I expect him to have another decent week. Now, again, that's provided his number is not like at 80 or 90 or something ridiculous. We'll have to see what it is. I'm expecting it to be in the 60s where it's been just about every week. Pittsburgh, Houston over 42. I took the Houston over last week against Jacksonville, and it ended up being an easy play. I kind of like this one too. I think Pittsburgh will create some turnovers, give themselves good field position. They should be able to run all over Houston. And on the other side, C.J. Stroud has been throwing it all over the field, and he's been fantastic. I read a stat where actually he's a top 3 rookie quarterback in terms of first 3 games passing yards. It's pretty impressive. Vegas plus a 5.5. I like that dog. And then I'm going to go with either Tutu Atwell or Pukanuka over their receiving totals. I just need to see what they are. And then look at those cornerback matchups and then decide. But I think one or both could get there. It just depends on what they are. I want to take a look. Once again, here's my picks in the primary poll. You can see right a little wacky take Minnesota, a team that's busted my chops year in and year out, but I'm going to gamble on them. And then I'm probably going Philadelphia and San Francisco. Thank you guys for joining us this week. Thanks to CooperGroove.com, our sponsor. Hey, I do have a mid-year pool that's going to be going. I'm going to get some information out on that pretty quickly. If you want to join it, let me know. Hit me up in the comments down below and I'll get you the info. So join the mid-year pool. Thanks again to CooperGroove.com. Thanks again for being here. We hope you like the show. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. This has been week number 4. Picking winners with the Cheezeman. Good luck and we hope you survive.